Hi, everybody. I just wanted to talk about the last couple of chapters and to kind of get you up to speed on some of the things that you've been discussing in your answers, and a little bit about in the forum as well. And I'm coming to you from the bowels of the theater department today, and I just wanted to upload a video to send to you so you could have a listen and hear about what I have to say about some of the things you've written. First of all, I'm going to talk about Golden Child and your responses to the questions regarding David Henry Hwang's play. Turst of all, it is no playwright writes with a particular structure in mind. A playwright doesn't go, I'm going to make this a climactic structure or a circular structure. They don't really think of it that way. Things hopefully organically materialize in certain ways that way. So with Golden Child, I deliberately chose it because there are a variety of possibilities and possible questions, and certainly it's open to discussion. But I would have to say that the play itself employs, in terms of a plot structure, it employs somewhere between a circular and climactic plot structure. It's not episodic, and it's somewhat nonlinear, although most of it is in a linear fashion. So you should see it as somewhat circular in the sense that it begins and ends with Andrew, and it takes a look at what he's looking for and what he's trying to discover, and we go back into that world as a result of his questions. So that's circular. And when it's climactic, it's because climactic means that each scene is a little mini play on its own, and it builds to something. If you were to take it episodically, you'd see a whole bunch of small scenes that all contribute to something. And I can't say that play is really episodic. The point of attack is the one that you seem to be having the biggest problem with. And so I want to talk about that really briefly. It is a very late point of attack in that play. Now, I can understand why you would suggest that it's early, because it goes way back in time. But I want you to think of the play itself, the play that you would see or read, as part of a much, much larger continuum, where the story is part of the play, but not necessarily in the play, the action of the play. So all of the stuff that happened 100 years ago actually takes place before the play starts. The play starts very, very late, and then has a flashback. Well, if it starts very late, it starts in modern day, essentially. That's a late point of attack. And then all of the events actually jump in. It's totally understandable that you might think that it's an early point of attack. But if you talk about when the play starts in relation to its entire picture, its entire story, we're talking about a late point of attack. The example that's used often for that is Oedipus Rex. Right? Oedipus Rex, it's a very late point of attack. Everything essentially has happened prior to Oedipus coming out of his ivory tower and asking the public what's wrong. And they go, well, we have plague, we can't grow anything, our city is coming to ruins, why has this happened? And he starts to uncover everything that's happened, and it's all because of him that all of this stuff has been going badly. That's a late point of attack, even though all of these things have happened prior. The complication, you're pretty much on there. It's Tang Bin coming back and realizing that he has new ideas and challenging everybody to adapt these new ideas, and pretty much everyone is challenged by them in one way or another. Archetypes. The Golden Child herself is definitely an archetype, although there's some element of deconstruction in her, where she's not a complete archetypal character. Wives 2 and 3 have elements of archetypes in them as well, where we get a sense of what the second and third wives, their purpose they serve, and what they're like. But again, no character in that play is completely archetypal. The only deconstructed character that I think is in that play is the first wife. She is, to me, a deconstructed character. You're expecting this very rigid, kind of bitchy, very dominant woman who plays a lot of games, and you gradually see her break down. that the edges are being frayed and she's coming apart. That's a writer deconstructing the character, taking the character apart and revealing the character for what she is. So there's a strong element of deconstruction there. Several of you talked about the Reverend as being a stock character. He's not a stock character. There are no stock characters in this play. Stock characters are characters that you would see almost anywhere, like the butler or something in a murder mystery play or something like that. That's a stock character. However, the Reverend is a depersonalized character. He's a character that we don't really get to know as well, and to some extent he does represent a certain viewpoint. But there's enough humanity in him, and there's he's well-rounded enough, there's enough nuance that you get to see him in a much more complex way than you would a stock character. The last thing I'll mention about Golden Child is that use of language and why it's written the way it's written. There are two elements to that. One is this desire to create this choppy English, this sense of stunted English, to create a sense that they're speaking in a different language. And there's some element of humor and comedy in the way they speak that allows the sentences and the meaning to crystallize in a comic way as a result of the way they speak in English. But remember, they would be speaking in some form of a Chinese dialect. The other thing I will talk about very briefly is the hugely ironic way that David Henry Hwang actually uses the way that the wives speak to each other, how they're always trying to compliment each other, and none of them are willing to accept the compliment. In fact, they're so unwilling to accept the compliment that they get angry and think that the person is actually trying to insult them when they're complimenting them. That's a humorous way that Wang is attempting to show just how sad the state of womanhood is in that time, where women can't possibly, they're so subservient that they can't possibly accept a compliment. So now I'm going to talk very briefly about tragedy from Chapter 4 and tell you a bit about my views on the tragic elements. There are three different ideas of tragedy in that chapter. There's the Greek tragedy, the Greek tragic hero, the Renaissance Shakespearean tragic hero, and then there's the modern tragic hero, generally theorized by Arthur Miller. In the Greek tragic hero, the main character, the tragic hero, the hero is generally an individual who is very close to the gods, a king, a warrior, a general, or a female who is very high up, almost a god themselves, certainly revered as godlike characters on earth. That is part of the problem. They begin to see them as so godly and so powerful that they fail to recognize their own humanity. And it's partly the Greek audience wanting to take them down a peg or two in order to remind them that they're not gods. And it's a general reminder. It's a reminder to humanity to not get yourself too high up or not think of yourself too high up. That's this notion of hubris, which we see a lot in politics today. Politicians who think they're above the law all the time, and invariably they fall, or many of them do. This brings me to the Shakespearean idea of tragic hero. And in the Shakespearean tragic hero, it's no longer a question of disobeying the gods or ignoring your fate or anything like that. Remember, we're in a time of Christianity now. And so the Shakespearean tragic hero is an individual who, again, is a noble, high up, or among the elite. But they have flaws because they're human. And it's these flaws that take them down the wrong path. But it's not because they're disobeying the gods. It's not even in a sense because they're disobeying God. It's because they are falling prey to their own flaws as human beings. And that the morals that we live with are ones that should adhere to them as well. And they're taking to ignoring this and allowing that quality, whether it's ambition or revenge or pride or something like that, to pretty much dominate them completely. It's not always hubris, though, in the same way that the Greek tragedies have hubris as a central element to characters' downfall. Finally, we have the modern tragic hero. If you look at Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman, all you need to do is look at his last name. That's not by accident that he's called Loman, low man. It's Arthur Miller's desire to see the hero in all of us, even the lowest people who try to rise above the muck, above the chaos of the world, to become something better and bigger. And this desire to live the American dream or become somebody bigger and more important and have some significance. The tragedy in that is, of course, that we ultimately will fail, or that we tend to fail in that pursuit of beauty or perfection or being above what we probably are capable of doing. In Death of a Salesman, I'm sure many of you don't know the play that well. In Death of a Salesman, Willy Loman thinks of himself as a great man, that he's loved and revered and he has power and might and everybody loves him, when in fact everybody's forgotten about him. And when he starts to actually see, when he starts to have his own life revealed to him through Biff, his son, who says, "You're nobody, Dad, you're nobody. You're just a guy like everybody else," something snaps in Willy Loman and he gives up, because he starts to realize that his life is not much better than anyone else's. Every man, it's the everyman in all of us. Those are some notes on those two chapters. I encourage you to take a look at chapter 5 as quickly as you can and get going on it. There's a lot of things to look at and a lot of things to think about. I'm particularly moved by chapter 5 because of the fact that most of my influences have been very traditional, very Western, and the more I explore other theatrical elements, the more I begin incorporating them into my own work. And I find that very exciting. The use of all kinds of theatrical elements that are that we consider to be from another country or a little foreign or something like that. So take a look. I'm excited to engage in you in the forum this week. I'm going to try my best. I do run out of time sometimes. Try my best to kind of comment on your comments as we go this time. I really enjoyed reading your forum from last week, and I'm going to end with this. Where do our tragedies come from today? I really wanted to disagree with so many of you, because some of you are really, really wishy-washy. You're like, oh, our tragedies come from movies and from books and from plays. No. Where are most of our tragedies coming from in terms of art, in terms of performing arts right now? My argument would be that most of our tragedies are coming from television. And they're coming from these amazing, dark TV shows that are aired now all the time that we talk about constantly. Just look at the number of people who were watching Breaking Bad and talking about Breaking Bad. 10 million people saw the closing episode. Think of Downton Abbey. Think of Dexter. Think of Game of Thrones. There are so many amazing dramas that don't, or Homeland is another one, that don't pull their punches, that are tragic in nature, that feature tragic heroes, that feature darkness in people. We're not talking about your ordinary, everyday drama TV show where everybody is always alive. Yeah, there are bad things that happen, but the good guys stay alive. We're talking about tragic heroes, real tragedy, real pathos that engulfs us. And if you look at the anti-hero of Walter White in Breaking Bad, you start to see these really strong elements of tragedy. What's happening is theater has become more peripheral to to where we go to find our stories. And our stories invariably get played out on television. And a few of you mentioned things like YouTube and on the internet, and I think that's totally accurate, that people are putting themselves on YouTube and giving us a sense of their own tragedies, both real and fictional. And I think that's a very valid point. I don't think, as many of you did mention, and I totally disagree with you, I don't think our movies are where our tragedies are coming from. Our movies now are where our fantasies come from. If you go to a movie theater, generally you're going to see horror. That's not tragedy. That's fantasy. And you're going to see action flicks. That's not tragedy either. That's fantasy. And you're going to see Marvel Comics, action hero, Batman, Superman, all of that. Those aren't tragedies in the least. Do not confuse action, adventure, darkness, bad guys and stuff like that with tragedy. No, that's not tragedy. Tragedies are real dark movies where people die. And we don't see a whole lot of those because they don't sell. And movies have become the place that sell to a very, very limited demographic. Boys 16 to 29, basically, is what they're trying to sell to most of the time. And then the second is girls of a similar age, and you start to get the picture. Our movies, it's a sad time for movies as far as I'm concerned. The golden era of movies was actually the 1970s. If you look at movie critics and what they say, the golden era of television is now. Enjoy it. Talk to you soon. Bye.